Hello everyone, and Namo Va. My name is Francis Donald, and I'd like to welcome you to this session, the second in an ongoing series of webinars on sacred number and geometry. Namo Va means I bow to the one divinity expressing itself through each of you. It's the plural form of Namaste and is particularly applicable to today's webinar on oneness and the principle of unity. Okay, I'd like to introduce the rest of the staff. Brett, could you say hello?
Hi there.
I know you're there. We were just talking. Brett's our tech wizard. He keeps GoToMeeting afloat if something untoward happens. And BL?
Hello, everybody.
BL will be assisting me in answering your questions, or if you have any comments. Okay, before we get started, let's take a real quick look at the GoToMeeting interface. We've been here before last time, and I'm hoping that most of you are familiar with this, but I'll just quickly go back through it. First of all, if you wish to verbally participate, please use a headset. If you don't have a headset, there's a text box which is shown on your screen here down in the bottom left corner, which you can use to type in questions or answers, or you can even copy-paste great words of wisdom in there. Also, if you have any problems with this interface, you can't hear, or you raise your hand and we're not calling on you, use this text box to get through to us. There's really only one button that you're going to be using a lot during this. Hopefully you'll be using it. You see it in your screen there with the little B. There's a little button up on the right corner of your screen, and it shows a hand with an up-pointing arrow. And you click that once, and your hand is digitally raised. Click it again to lower it, but we'll be lowering it for you, so don't worry about that. So that's the way you interact verbally. Then we'll call on you, and you can make your comment or ask your questions. And other than that, the only other button that you might want to use is the webcam button, which is on the left upper part of your screen. That allows you to shift where you're seeing my talking head right now. Or if you have a PC, you can turn it off. If you have a Mac, you can go up in your menu under webcam and turn it off and just have the full screen, full slide screen instead of the talking head, which would be perfectly fine with me. I don't have much vanity around that issue, and I wouldn't know anyway, so what the heck. Okay. If you have any other questions about the GoToMeeting interface, feel free to type them in the text box, and we'll get back to you. All right, let's get started. One of you asked that I provide a summary statement for last month's webinar. You might remember that the key question was, what makes sacred number and geometry sacred? The clearest, most succinct summary I could find comes, not surprisingly, from the Tibetan. Could we get a volunteer to read this? We can also try out our system here, see if we can get, try out your hands up button. BL, do we have a volunteer?
No, not yet. Come on, you guys.
Try out your voice.
Okay, now I got a whole bunch.
Oh, good.
Let's try Scott.
Okay. Are you hearing me okay?
We're hearing you
Yes.
great.
Great. All right. All forms veil a divine thought, idea, or truth, and are the tangible manifestation of a divine concept. When a man or woman knows this, he or she begins to read spiritually, to see below the surface, and so contact the idea which gave birth to the form.
Thank you. Well, this statement really describes our goal as sacred geometers, to see below the surface and so contact the idea, which is a living presence that animates the numbers and geometrical forms we'll be studying. You know, we're taught the universal applicability of number at a very early age. I mean, most 5-year-olds in the world's modern cultures know that the 1 in one banana and the 1 in one cat represent the same oneness. Even though cats and bananas are completely different, the one that qualifies both is recognized as being the same. In our culture, but not everyone in the world shares this unified abstract understanding of number. The 1 in one elephant in the Persian language, for instance, is completely different than the 1 of one easel, thus suggesting a qualitative difference in the oneness based on what is being referred to. It's difficult for us to even imagine a quality shift in reference to number because we don't have that in our language. Do you understand what I'm talking about? We're not talking about the difference between an elephant and an easel, but in the nature of the oneness that defines them. Okay. By the way, yes, this elephant is drawing a picture of an elephant, which could be easily the subject of a whole other webinar. Unfortunately, we can't explore this right now. In Papua, which is down in the South Pacific, New Guinea area, there are over 20 different numbering systems in use based on what is being counted. Long things, for instance, have their own numbering system. From the perspective of our modern data-oriented civilization, these, what we might call primitive number systems seem cumbersome and unwieldy, and they are if the focus is on data and data compilation. But when in the not-so-distant past, modern civilizations uncoupled number from the nouns they represent, we gained efficiency, but lost all sense of the intrinsic quality or meaning of number. As a result, we've learned to see 3 as being identical to 2 plus 1, a fact only true when number is viewed as data. Thus, we have 3, but we've lost our sense of threeness. The most fundamental tenet of sacred number and geometry is that every number and shape has an intrinsic quality or qualities which are expressive of a particular life force. Okay, embracing this idea is especially important if we are to gain any understanding of today's topic, the number 1, or more specifically, oneness. No other number takes us to such philosophic heights, as you'll soon discover, nor has such an enigmatic range of characteristics. A study of oneness quickly takes us into the incomprehensible, yet we intuitively recognize unity, a fundamental attribute of oneness in our daily lives. If you see a flock of starlings fly by and they suddenly change direction, that quality of oneness that animates those birds to move as a body at the same time is a revelation of something that is normally invisible to us. The Mystery of Numbers. In The Mystery of Numbers, the author Anna Marie Schimmel states, actually, let's get somebody to read this. Could we get a volunteer to read this short passage? It's quite intense passage on the number 1.
Okay. Whoops.
Anyone?
Yeah. Walter, go ahead, please.
1 became the symbol of the primordial one, the divine without a second, the non-polarized existence. It comprises relation, entirety, and unity, and rests in itself but stands behind all created existence.
Thanks, Walter. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, The Mystery of Numbers by Anna Marie Schimmel.
Thanks, Walter. That's great. Any thoughts on this? This is not a light statement. Any part of this, any phrase that piques your interest, anybody have any ideas or thoughts they'd like to share about this statement? It's a little bit of jumping into the deep end here, but that's what happens with oneness. That's the nature of the number. BL, do we have anybody?
Well, Guadalupe, she just put her hand down. There was one hand, but it was the volunteer from, here we go. Go ahead, please, Yogi.
Well, hello, everyone, and it's good to be a part of this wonderful group. One. One is either infinitesimal or as large as it needs to be. If you're a galaxy being born, well, it's pretty large compared to a human being. But if you are a virus and you have components looking into itself, those are pretty small. So one is actually a ring past naught. It is an area, a stage of action and becoming by accord with will or the purpose of being or being born. So one is the beginning and the end of all, and one is where we all start. And then as the fool in the tarot deck finds a new height or a new playtime or an expansion in capability, a new one is made. So it's infinitesimal and all-inclusive.
Thank you very much. And your name?
Yogi.
Yogi, thank you very much. It's beautiful thoughts there. And it's interesting to think what ties together the infinitesimal and the largest components, you know, for instance, the galaxies of oneness. Could we get rid of that echo? Yeah, thank you. And, you know, to jump ahead a little bit, we might say that the common denominator of the tiniest of tiny and the unimaginably vast is the one life that inhabits both. Yeah.
Okay, Francis.
Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple of hands still raised.
Great.
Let me check in with each of them real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Guadalupe, did you have a comment? Lapita? Are you self-muted because we can't hear you?
Yeah, there's a...
Hello.
There you go. We can hear you now.
Sorry, I was having trouble with my buttons. Yes, my comment was going to be that this reminds me of the idea that the one that is divided is not the one. But at this, like the Tao that is defined or divided is not the Tao. But at the same time, that oneness or the one, as you just said before, is like the drop in the ocean. It comprises everything entirely, is part of the unity, and in itself the drop stands, but is also created by the ocean or part of the big creation.
Yes, thank you. That's a marvelous, you know, and well-known analogy of recognition that you're a drop in the ocean is identification with the being who is the ocean. In fact, in theosophy, the term is the ocean of being, from which the one life, I don't know if you could say that it springs or if it's inherent in this ocean of being. But thank you for that. Any other thoughts?
Yes, we have one more. Go ahead, Asha. You had a question or a comment?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. When I think of one, I think of potentiality, like it says the primordial one with the primordial suit, and I think there's no separation, and before creation as we know it. That's my sort of
Yes.
feeling
Yes.
about it.
Yes, thank you. We'll actually be looking into this concept of potentiality as we explore this number. Thank you for that. Okay, anyone else?
No, I don't see anybody else with a hand raised right now.
Oh.
I lied. Hold on a minute.
Okay.
Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Terry. We can hear you. Oops, we can't now. Did you mute yourself?
Right. I've turned myself on now.
There you
it's
got
the
it.
word primordial that hasn't been tackled yet, isn't it? The word primordial. I can, I'm searching my mind to get it right. I think it refers to referring back. It's where it's come from. The idea that it has come from something, from perhaps a previous existence, or implies a previous existence. And I think we ought to tackle that. We oughtn't to leave it out.
We certainly will tackle that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you finished with Terry there?
I sure was, yeah.
Okay. You have a couple of other comments here.
Great.
Let me see. To me, the number that stands behind all created existence is 0. 0 is all the number that exists between each successive number. That's from Laura Lee. And then from Gabrielle, from the Schimmel quote, if the one comprises relation, wouldn't that imply 2?
Yeah, that's, if there is, well, by the way, both Gabrielle and Laura Lee are in my neighborhood, which is terrific. Thanks for being here, both of you. I found when I was looking at this that the most difficult single concept in this statement to wrap my head around was this term relation. So I gave it some thought, and what I realized is that one of the qualities, and this comes from the Greeks, is that all numbers are contained within the number 1, right? And the very aspect of unity, which is one of the fundamental qualities of oneness, is inherent to the nature of the number 1. And the desire, I should say, the expression of unity works out in relation. So the sense of wanting to achieve unity is what you might say animates relation. Now, if you have other thoughts about that, I'd love to hear them, because this is, I think, for me anyway, this is the toughest single concept that Schimmel introduces here. But that's my thoughts on that anyway. Okay, did I answer Laura Lee's question? That was, I think that was from Gabrielle. What did Laura Lee
No,
have?
hers was about, well, okay, Gabrielle's was about wouldn't relation imply 2, and Laura Lee's was about 0.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, 0, that's a topic in itself, and there is definitely something to what you say, and we'll be addressing that. It comes down to semantics in a certain sense, but 0 has a lot to do with what you consider it to be. You know, the idea of it being nothing, for instance, is a kind of heresy, right? Because there is nothing that's outside of divinity. So that concept of 0 is not really the esoteric understanding of, you know, the life that animates 0. It from where you're coming from, at least from what you said, it's going to have to do with the, you could call it the unmanifest one. And we're going to be getting right into that now. So I could just say, hold that thought. Okay, we're going to move on. Yeah.
Sheldon has a comment. Hold on.
Okay.
Oh, he just put his hand down.
Oh, that's okay, Sheldon. Go ahead.
Sheldon?
I always like to hear from you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me, Francis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, I thought I would just, you were ready to move on. I thought I would duck out. Just a very quick thought about that sentence. It comprises relation, entirety, and unity, and rests in itself. I'm just wondering, is there a possible trinity in those three words anyway? Relation could be a two, a son. Entirety might be father, and unity could be all together, kind of like all together. So just a thought about a trinity here with those three terms. Yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot. And we're going to be getting into stanza 1 and the secret doctrine. And one of the comments, or one of the phrases in stanza 1, and I'm paraphrasing now, is that once more the father and mother and son are one. And so you may have a line on that, right, in your understanding of this Trinity. I like that, actually. Okay, we're going to move on now. I have a lot to cover. Okay, many of Schimmel's ideas, Anne-Marie Schimmel, who wrote this book, Mystery of Number, are in keeping with Greek thought. The Greeks believed that 1 wasn't a number at all, but was rather the parent of all numbers, containing within itself both the male and female principles. So you can see the sense of relation right there within the number 1. Now, actually, it boggles the mind, doesn't it? There's really no way to both see male and female principles as unity and yet recognize them separately. But that's in keeping with the study of this concept. All other numbers, according to this way of thinking, are contained within the 1, and when manifested from the 1, do so as an infinite variety of the qualities of oneness. So what he's saying here is that basically nothing is outside oneness, which the Greeks called the monad, by the way, and the Gnostics called the silent force. I really like that, the idea of the silent force, And the Greeks' understanding of 1 as the monad is a little different than the theosophical understanding of the monad, but they also have very much in common. But let's get back to Schimmel's statement for one more pass. She starts by describing the 1 as the symbol of the primordial 1, and ends by telling us that 1 rests in itself but stands behind all created existence. And I think, Laura Lee, that's where your idea of 0 comes in. But to get a better sense of Schimmel's meaning, let's take a look at the proem of Helena Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine. Okay. We're going to be diving into the deep end here. In fact, this is the Marianas Trench of deep ends. But, hey, that's where 1 lives, and so that's where we're going to go to find it. We'll be making frequent references to HPB's Secret Doctrine, one of the most recognized and celebrated masterpieces of esoteric philosophy. I want to make a point that is often overlooked. There are actually 2 secret doctrines. The multi-volume set written by HPB, which you see here depicted on the screen, and what you could call the true secret doctrine, which HPB referenced in order to write her great opus, and to which she occasionally alludes to by name. And part of that secret doctrine would certainly be all the stanzas of Zion and the old commentaries in general. But anyway, I think that distinction is interesting. Okay, so this is the very first page, the very first line of the very first page of the Secret Doctrine, and she jumps right in. Could we get a volunteer to read this?
First, before I look, and I don't see any hands right yet, I just want to say that you got a comment from Bobby about nothing. Nothing is no thing, rather than meaning zero. No thing except the source itself.
Oh, I like that. Thank you. Thank you, Bobby. That's great.
Okay, and here I got a volunteer, so Yogi, go ahead, please.
Does someone volunteer me? How about? All right.
Your hand was up. Your hand was up.
Well, actually, yes. Yeah, I'll ask the question when I'll go ahead. An archaic manuscript, a collection of palm leaves made impermeable to water, fire, and air by some specific unknown process, is before the writer's eye. On the first page is an immaculate white disk within a dull black ground. On the following page, the same disk, but with a central point. At first, the student knows to represent cosmos in eternity, before the reawakening of still slumbering energy, the emanation of the Word in later systems. A poem.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Before we go any deeper, let's look at the essence of this statement, along with an illustration of the immaculate white disk, which HPB tells us represents cosmos in eternity before the reawakening of still slumbering energy. There's a lot in this one phrase. Do we have any brave souls that want to give us some insight into this idea? What do you think she might mean by still slumbering energy? Any thoughts on this?
Yogi had a comment earlier, so the echo's pretty bad, though.
Yeah, go ahead. Do you have a comment? Okay, if you do, why don't you type it into the text box, and we'll read that out loud. And if you're interested in this series, I suggest you go to Amazon.com and spend $10 on a headset, if that's the source of the echo, which I would imagine it is. Okay. In case you're thinking that a description of this state, which is described here, is unique to the Secret Doctrine, it's not unique. There's plenty of other cultural references. In Genesis 1, verse 2, the Bible tells us that darkness was on the face of the deep. In Hinduism, this same state, a level of existence, is called the night of Brahman, described as a boundless darkness. My favorite comes from the Norse tradition, which states that in the beginning was a great abyss. Neither day nor night existed. This abyss was a yawning gulf without beginning and without end. All Father, the uncreated, dwelt in the depths of the abyss. The symbol for these references, all these references, is this featureless disk. Now, in conjunction with this symbol, we must also consider the Ouroboros, which represents both immortality and eternity. My favorite quote on eternity comes from Joseph Campbell in his Power of Myth series, which I'm sure many of you saw decades ago. He says, eternity is not a long time. Eternity has nothing to do with time. Eternity is that dimension of here and now which thinking and time cuts out. And the experience of eternity is right here and now, is the function of life. Okay, what is there in this symbol that you see on your screen, which is the Ouroboros? What in this describes what Campbell has to say about eternity? Any thoughts? Why does this, yeah.
Francis, we have a thought from Yogi. Joseph Campbell, great wisdom, good soup.
Yes, indeed, good soup. So anybody have any ideas as to how the Ouroboros describes what Joe Campbell has to say? Eternity has nothing to do with time. That's probably the seminal statement here.
Go ahead, Lapita.
The other thing is that the Ouroboros also represents that there is no beginning, there is no end. The beginning, the head, goes, and the end is the tail. But again, so whichever way you see it, there is a continuum. That is now, the present, and also that is life. It's
Absolutely.
here, it's now.
Yeah, actually you answered my question. You know, it represents the alpha and omega of both being and of time, doesn't it? I mean, if you took the snake and you stretched it out, you know, then you would have an A to B sequence. You know, the head representing the beginning of a time sequence and then moving to the tail at the end of the sequence. But when you connect them in a circle, and this also gives great insight into the nature of a circle, which is the universal symbol of oneness, then you have what's called in theosophy the day be with us, which is, well, as Joe Campbell describes it, the true meaning of eternity, which has nothing to do with time. But why a serpent? What's the deal with using a serpent? Why not, you know, of course, you know, it's easier to have a serpent have his tail in his mouth than many other animals, but it's not, the reason for that isn't that superficial. There's other ideas connected with this. I'll tell you that, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Malia added, in my beginning is my ending. And then Orist had a comment too.
Okay.
Orist.
Hello?
Hello. Go ahead.
Sorry. The earlier picture, for my mind, reminded me of the hole in column. It's like from the blackness, something is pushed apart, and then you have the white light of the circle.
Mm.
So it's the beginning of the creative process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts about this?
Yes, Yogi, go ahead.
Yes, Yogi.
Yes, thank you for this very wonderful program. It's deep, thought-provoking. The earlier question that I forgot to ask is that a lot of people, when they study this wonderful group of works, they forget that either we're speaking of manifest or not manifest, manifesting in or manifesting out. 4 stable states, and then the 5th, which cannot be defined or known until we become fully functional, in full potential, that is. So to be a creator, co-creator, is what we are here on earth for. We are co-creating with the forces of nature in a ring past not. I like to call it ring past not yet. So the serpent holding its tail is a one with infinite possibility. Now, in some schools, they draw sections to the serpent so that unfolding and evolution may continue until you reach the head where a new one is formed, and then you have a cyclic pattern like a, well, if I could give you a symbol, I would. How about a automobile spring? It's a coil that moves up. It doesn't end. And there you have it.
Thank you, Yogi. You gave a hint to one of the reasons that a serpent is such an apropos symbol for for the Ouroboros, and that is the idea of progressing from the tail to the head, moving into new cycles. The serpent or snake is universally the you could call it an animistic symbol of cycles, because it sheds its skin, right? And esoterically seems to emerge anew, like this phoenix does when it's born from its own flaming death. It emerges anew into a new cycle. So this is certainly one reason that the serpent is used in this type of symbolism. In the highest levels, and this is, I'm paraphrasing from the proem of the Secret Doctrine, the serpent represents divine thought, the one life, eternal, invisible, yet omnipresent, without beginning or end, which is the obvious symbolism. It's the cosmic creative force encircling the primordial womb, the cosmic storehouse of all potential energy, unconscious, yet absolute consciousness. Now, we could spend the rest of the webinar just on that idea. Unconscious, yet absolute consciousness. Unrealizable, and yet the one self-existing reality. In Egyptian mythology, Neph, the eternal unrevealed God, is represented by the snake of eternity encircling a water urn with his head hovering over the waters, which he incubates with his breath. Now, I tried my best to find that imagery. I just couldn't find it. But if you just replace this primordial egg, which is a powerful symbol in itself, with a water jug, and imagine that this snake is breathing into the great waters through the opening of this water jug, you'll have the Egyptian version of what we've been talking about. HPB, which for those of you who don't know, that's Helena Blavatsky, who wrote the Secret Doctrine, calls this breath of Neph the great breath, which is translated to mean the perpetual motion of the universe, because the one attribute of that which has no attributes is that everything is in motion. There is nothing divine that is not in motion. So all three of these symbols represent basically the same concept. To give a better idea of the level of existence being described by these symbols, let's look at a couple of charts from a treatise on cosmic fire.
Okay, first.
Okay,
let me interrupt with you really quick here. Okay,
yeah,
Bobby, a comment. The serpent has been identified with wisdom, the dragon of wisdom, and seems to be a most ancient of symbols. Asha, serpent represents Kundalini rising energy. The serpent sheds its skin, as you were talking about. Heads looping into its tail. Also, the benzene ring for organic substance is circular. Nancy, why a serpent? Could it be that the serpent continually sheds its own skin? So this is a theme that your students were talking about at the same time, or thinking about at the same time you were bringing it up. On some level, it is becoming new, repeatedly transforming itself, unrelated to time, as connected to life and death. Yogi added HPB and Master KH, I think in reference to the term you were describing, the Neph. Egyptian and maybe some Atlantean. He also said the serpent containment, organic rod of life expression, manifest serpent, pass not till shedding.
Great. All great comments. Thank you very much.
I know they're all just coming in here, aren't they?
It's terrific. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay. It's when you're looking at a featureless white disk or a serpent holding its tail, it's difficult to project this to the level of being that we're talking about, the state of existence that is being indicated. And so I thought it might be useful to take a look at a couple of charts to pitch us up and into this high level of existence that we're describing. The first, many of you will recognize, describes the planetary hierarchy of the Earth scheme. This isn't about the chart. This is just to pitch the state of existence that we've been discussing and put it in its proper perspective. But I will briefly describe this. At the very bottom, you'll see that the initiates and disciples have their being. All those circles in the middle represent ashrams of different masters on first, second, and third grade lines. Then you have the Lord of the World, Sanat Kumaro, and the Manu, the Christ, and the Lord of Civilization. Above that, the planetary existences were the Ray Lords, and finally, at the top of this chart, you have the solar logos. Now, watch for this chart on the lower left corner of this chart. You see it there? Now follow where the solar logos is over to the system that's directly parallel to it. And you'll see one of those tiny little circles represents the solar logos in this much more cosmic chart. So that little system that the solar logos belongs to is enigmatically titled The One About Whom Not May Be Said, which in turn belongs to an even greater system and on up the line until we reach the seven spirits before the throne of God, which are emanations of the third logos, which are in turn emanations of the second and of the first logos, until finally we have that from which the first logos arose, the final and ultimate source of everything. This is not oneness, as Laura Lee was hinting at with the idea that it's zero, but the source of oneness, because it pre-exists everything. In fact, it pre-exists existence, which in our language is a nonsensical statement. The fact is that language, especially English, breaks down at this level of reality. There's no way that we can talk our way into any understanding of this level of existence. But the best attempt at a description that I've ever found comes to us from stanza 1 of the stanzas of Zan in The Secret Doctrine. So someone with good lung power, I'd like to have a volunteer to read this absolutely astonishing stanza from The Secret Doctrine. Stanza 1. Do we have a volunteer?
Hold on just one second. You've got a couple of comments here from Yogi, so let me go to him first, and then I'll look for volunteers while he's talking. Go ahead, Yogi.
The eternal parent, wrapped in her ever invisible robes, had slumbered once again for 7 eternities.
Go ahead.
Oh, there's more? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, time was not, sorry, apologize for that. Time was not, for it lay asleep in the infinite bosom of duration. 3. Universal mind was not, for there were no he to contain it. 4. The 7 ways to bless or bliss were not. The great causes of misery were not, for there was no one to produce and get ensnared by them. 5. Darkness alone filled the boundless all, for Father, Mother, and Son were once more one, and the Son had not awakened yet for the new wheel as his pilgrim thereon. Sorry, as that wheel came up, I thought of the snake again as a wheel. Pardon me. 6. The 7 sublime lords and the 7 truths had ceased to be, and the universe, the son of necessity, was immersed in Paranishpata, panna, to be out-breathed by that which is and yet is not. Not was. 7. The causes of existence had been done away with. The visible that was and the invisible that is rested in eternal non-being. The one being. And 8. Alone the one form of existence, stretched, boundless, infinite, causeless, in dreamless sleep, and life pulsated unconscious in universal space throughout that all-presence which is sensed by the open eye of the Dhamma. Stanza 1, stanzas of Zion, the secret doctrine.
Thank you very much. That was beautiful and dramatic reading. Thank you. Okay.
We have a couple of more comments here, so let me just get to them really quick. Yogi had said previously that, remember, the human spine is the same as the serpent, and that the mnemonikai is like to cruise in groups deeply. And then Lynn added, there is also some analogy between the undifferentiated circle and the octave before fertilization and differentiation. Then it progresses to some degree as the one becomes two, etc.
Thank you, yes. Okay, what can we say about this extraordinary stanza? And I'd like to hear from some people who haven't commented yet. Any part of this, of these 8 verses from this stanza 1, any thoughts at all? Any comments about this? Notice how this pre-archetypal reality is described largely in terms of what was not. Time was not, mind was not, the path was not, truth was not. But maybe most profoundly of all, the causes of existence were not. Not existence was not, but the causes of existence were not. So what are we left with? What was? Well, not was, except the eternal non-being, the one being. This non-being, who is the one being, is the highest, most causal reference that we're ever likely to find concerning the number 1. So I suggest that it's here that we root our understanding of oneness. Okay? So do we have any comments or thoughts on this stanza?
We have a couple of comments. Dreamless sleep, our reality is but a cosmic dream. Is that a song? Morya, who or what is the Dhamma which was observing? Yogi, inner light is Buddha, ignited in will, love, and knowledge, opening of soul.
Thank you.
And I'm looking for hands, but I don't see any hands.
Okay, well, let me get to the Dhamma. This concept of the eye of Shiva, which is the one eye, is the opened eye of Dhamma on the highest levels. Well, you could just imagine the level of mastery that would be needed in order to perceive this level of existence. In fact, it astonishes me that there's any singular consciousness that could do that, but so we're told. Okay. I'm going to go on because we really do have a lot to cover. The Fibonacci sequence, which we'll be studying at length in a future webinar, begins with 1 and then must repeat that 1 for the system to work. We could associate this first 1 that you see there on the left with the one being who is the eternal non-being. In Kabbalism, this being is called Ayin, or Ayin Sof. Non-being, then the one being, which in turn enables the sequence. Okay? Now, with this perspective on oneness, let's go back to the first page of the Secret Doctrine. HBB continues, the point in the hitherto emasculate disk, space and eternity in pralaya, denotes the dawn of differentiation. Okay, for our purposes, pralaya simply means a period of inactivity or abstraction that occurs between universes. This is a vast subject in itself, and unfortunately, we're going to be skirting a lot of vast subjects in order to stay on point, so to speak. Okay, so we have space and eternity in pralaya. This describes the immaculate featureless disk, right? And then the point in the hitherto immaculate disk denotes the dawn of differentiation. So we really have the source of oneness and oneness itself indicated by this circle with the point at the center. Okay, so the source of one gives rise to one, which is the first cause or unity within eternity. It's called the verbum, which is the Western name for logos, from which emanates the one sound, or said more simply, what we're seeing here is God transcendent. In the Pythagorean school, the logos, and by extension the principle of oneness, was considered to be both male and female, because everything is conceptually within it. Remember before Schimmel was pointing out that it contained both father and mother, right? The Greeks likened the monad to moral wisdom, for what is correct is one. And they called it being with a capital B, the cause of truth, simplicity, the paradigm, order, and concord. These are some of the adjectives that describe the nature of oneness. Okay, remember the Egyptian god Kneph hovering above the primordial waters, which he incubates with his breath, that idea? Okay, during the next phase, an egg issues from his mouth. And from that egg issues a winged serpent. The symbol, and this is what we're looking at here, the symbol of the Egyptian first logos. Now the Hindus give the name of Shiva, the destroyer, to this first principle. In a treatise on cosmic fire, Dwal Kul tells us, that's the Tibetan, that Shiva stands for, and these are his own words, the will aspect, the spirit aspect, the Father in heaven, the directing purpose, conscious energy, and dynamic intent. Okay, we can get some insight into both figures when we overlay the image of Shiva on the symbol of the first logos. Notice how the central dot corresponds to the hara of Shiva, the center in the Chinese tradition from which flows qi, or the life force of the universe. Okay, we know that the point represents the dawn of differentiation, right? We might speculate that this coming into being occurs as a result of the flowing out of qi, or the life force, the breath of the serpent god Kneph. You see, you have lots of different visual metaphors for the same reality, because the fact is there is nothing in our visual world that can come anywhere close. The best that any visual metaphor can do is pitch us towards some really feeble understanding of this level of reality. HPB says, there goes forth one little spark, which maketh all the glory of the sun, the moon, and the stars. And its name is Anupadaka. And she's talking now about this differentiated point. Hermes Trismegistus stated that God is an intelligible sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. This is a very famous thought. It cropped up actually for the first time on the written page in the 12th century, and I think it was Pascal who actually wrote it and brought it forward in modern times. Any thoughts about this statement? God is an intelligible sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. Do we have any thoughts about that? What is meant by, let's just take part of the statement. How can the center be everywhere? Can we get an idea? Let's see if we can hear from some new people.
Okay, I've got a couple of comments here. From Yogi, seed copies of God is monadic, and then from Scott, Hermes is referring to the first circle without the point. Fibonacci is also seen starting with 0, the immaculate disk. The first one is the disk with the point in its center. From there, the diameter, the second one, and cross to manifest.
Thank you. Yes, I can see that understanding. Yes. Okay. Okay. Now let's come back to this statement.
From Rose, it goes back to the timeless and spaceless point of consciousness.
Timeless and spaceless point of consciousness. Okay. Yes. It does indeed emanate from that place. But why specifically is the center everywhere? Any thoughts about that?
I got a hand raised here. Let's go to Martin. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I think it has to do with the fractal nature and the holographic nature and the synthetic nature simultaneously.
Thank you. Do you have a copy of my notes? Is that how you did that? Oh.
No, I'm very
just kidding. Clearly. Yes, indeed. I think there's some real truth in this concept of the fractal. The one way of looking at this is just simply that the one life is in each and every form of existence, because there's nothing without life. This idea that we're separate units is, the great illusion, right? So that each and every one of us is, in fact, the center, which is everywhere, is the truth that leads towards the fact that we are of the same one life, right?
Francis?
Okay. Yeah.
Let me see. Yogi added perfect consciousness of all the parts. Morya, same basis as wherever you go, there you are. Yogi, so center is all. And Bobby, center is everywhere, perhaps because it is the potential and without nothing else exists. All is one, as one hidden at first, full creator, from Yogi. Rose, because space is illusion, as quantum physics has shown. And as Yogi just added completion.
Yeah, that's interesting, the idea that, if space is illusion, then that's another take on this. And it's actually, I think, on a higher spiral of this understanding, which is, if space is an illusion, which it's certainly, what we're looking at here is right at the threshold of space, of the creation of space, then certainly at the level of the consciousness of the first logos, at this cosmic level, the point is everywhere, because space does not yet have an other coordinate. There is no other coordinate in which that point could exist. I like that thought. Thank you. Okay. In the Egyptian pantheon, Shiva's parallel can be found in Ra, whereas the Greek Zeus, in spite of his thunderbolt, is a much more personal god and thus is not at this high causal level. From the Egyptian Book of the Dead, Ra proclaims, "I shine forth out of the egg, which is in the unseen world. Let not my hand be repulsed by the divine circle of the great God. I have come to do the will of my heart out of the abode of flame, which I extinguished when I came forth." You're just not going to get much more esoteric than the ancient Egyptian understanding of cosmogony. You can see this circle above the head of the god Ra, which is both a local solar logoic being, and we can extend it to the level of that we're talking about here, which is this level of this cosmic first logos. You can see that this snake enwrapped circle is very similar to our theosophical concept of the Ouroboros, right? Except that the tail and the head are separate here, which suggests a different level of the development here, right? The Secret Doctrines version of this event is found in stanza 3, verse 7. I love this. "Behold the unparalleled refulgent glory, bright space, son of dark space, who emerged from the depths of the great dark waters. He shines forth as the sun. He is the blazing divine dragon of wisdom." It's just, you can't get much better than the stanzas of Zahn. Okay, last month we explored the concept of the cube of space with its 6 directions. The central point of this cube represents that same point of differentiation as the central point of the first logos. So let's overlay the image of Shiva, the symbol of the first logos, and the cube of space. Notice how Shiva has 4 arms, which together with his 2 legs can be seen as delineating the 6 directions, right? With the central point at his hara, making the 7th directionless direction, pointing inward to realms beyond those qualified by space and time, to the one non-being, right? Since it is the point of origin, this 7th direction is actually the first. So what actually defines this first step or dawn of differentiation, which the central point represents? What happens at this point? What signifies this differentiation? What occurs? The cube gives us a hint. Do we have any thoughts on this?
Not so far.
Okay. It's a big question, isn't it? And of course, it's there's great hubris in imagining that we can know the real answer or wrap our minds around it. But within our little tiny construct that we're building to mirror this great reality, what could this central point, which the first logos represents, manifest as?
Okay, I have a couple of takers.
Okay.
Brent says it provides a central reference point, and Ayla, synthetic being creates the universe.
Yes, Ayla, one way of looking at this is that it opens time and space, doesn't it? It's if you look at the dance of Shiva here, everything about what he's doing is the opening of both time and space. In one of his hands, he's holding a little tiny drum, which he beats at a measured interval. That creates time. At the same time, he's moving his forearms and his two legs in this dance that opens space. So you can see what a marvelous metaphor this is for the that first differentiation. Okay, what theory in science?
Francis?
Yeah.
Yogi added, it is all is it.
It
And
is all is, yes.
Right, capitalized it, all, and it. So, Nancy, it is the place where the breath of life enters in following, this is a question. Is it the place where the breath of life enters following pralaya? Orest, question mark, consciousness. Yogi, white magicians take the prima materia and do same as Shiva, as Master K.H. defines in his letters. So,
okay, thank you.
That's what I got so far.
Great. Starting with the great breath, it certainly is where the great breath manifests into the space-time continuum. You could say, remember my discussion or the idea of the chi moving forth into the manifested realm, or actually the agent of creation of the manifested realm. So yes, I see it as one and the same. It's the great breath. You know, we're mixing two metaphors here. The great breath would seemingly come from the mouth, right? And we have here the central point of the hara. But the hara is also the source of chi, which is that life force. And so those two concepts are very parallel, the great breath and the life force, right? And let's see, there was a second question there. I'm not great at stacking my questions.
Sorry. Consciousness?
Oh yeah, consciousness.
The question from Orest?
Right, Orest, yes. Remember in the stanza 1 where he said unconscious but all consciousness. I think here what we have is where the unconscious becomes self-conscious at that highest level, right? And that's what the point is universally represents. Because at the point of self-consciousness, you then have a ring past naught, which defines the realm of your consciousness. Well, at the level of the cosmic first logos, there is, well, as the statement says, the circumference is nowhere because the consciousness is all-inclusive. There's nothing outside that circumference. What Yogi said was the all, right? This is the all. Okay. Okay, I'd like to move on. What theory in...
Oh,
yeah.
You,
go ahead.
You have, Yogi has Chi and Kundalini, and then Ayla had a good comment here that I was going to let her... go ahead, Ayla.
Electric spin creates polarity.
Would you repeat that, please?
Electric spin creates polarity.
Yes, yes, yes. That's interesting because in order to move from the non-polarized unity, you have to gain polarity, which suggests the movement. I can see a connection there between the electric spin, as you say it, or the emanation of the electrical force, which is also called Fohat. This is another whole webinar's worth of discussion. And the automatic, so to speak, production of polarity, right? I mean, already we have, by the existence of the first logos, we have the non-being and the one being, right? So you could say that that's that first polarity. I think Michael in a faculty webinar was talking about how the great breath moves that polarity from one to the other, and that could be called existence and pralaya, back and forth through the concept of the in and the out breath. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Okay, and we've got something here from Laura Lee. The center of the cube of space is represented by the Hebrew letter, and I may say this wrong, I'm sorry, Tav. The Book of Formation attributes the letter Tav, the temple of holiness in the midst, which carries and supports the 6 directions of space.
Thank you for that comment. That's terrific. I'm not familiar with the significance of the letter Tav, so I won't attempt to comment on that, but it's something I'm going to look into. If we could move ahead, I'd like to ask what theory in science corresponds to what we've been discussing, especially as concerns the central point representing the dawn of differentiation. I bet someone can come up with this. What common theory in science is a parallel concept with what we've been talking about? Anybody?
Scott says the Big Bang.
That's it. That's it. We need not go any further.
Yeah, a whole bunch of people said that. Brent, Gabriel.
Oh, great.
And then there
Exactly.
were a couple of other questions, answers, but I'll let you expand on the Big Bang.
Okay, and then we'll come back to those other ideas. Okay, science tells us that nothing existed before the Big Bang, right? Sound familiar? Time was not, mind was not, the path was not, truth was not, the causes of existence were not was, except, and this is where we part with science, the eternal non-being, the one being. So you can see the possibility of the Big Bang being the point from which one of the loci, and we can't say it's the first loci, because when you're trying to match science with esoteric philosophy, the best you're going to get is a loose parallel, right? Because science is completely materialistic in its orientation. But one of the loci, that which actually expresses in terms of substance, launched the cycle of manifestation, right? Since it's a purely materialistic theory, the Big Bang might be seen as an effect of the opening of space, which is the function of the first logos. Okay, let's get back to our illustration here. This is our Big Bang right here. Did you want to float the other concepts about the science, the scientific theories, BL? What else was?
Okay, energy fields make divine, timeless presence or bliss from Yogi. Or rest, David Bohm, implicate order. Bunch more Big Bangs. Nancy, question mark the 0 point. Yogi, symbolic energy works in and out of time, space, mind.
What a great group of people we have. That's terrific. Thank you. Okay, let's get back to this illustration for a moment. Shiva within the cosmic circle is just one example of how the circle with the dot at the center, which is shown here, which is the first figure in sacred geometry, and the esoteric expression of the number 1 appears in sacred tradition throughout the world. So this figure and this understanding of our spiritual origin has inspired countless designs, right? In architecture, we have circular temples, from the very simple, like this temple of Aeolus. We have the temple of Vesta with its central fiery hearth representing the central point, and we have the temple of Hercules. To much more elaborate constructs like the Pantheon, which is a personal favorite of mine, not because of all this stuff down below, but because the central dot is the source of illumination, which I think is a brilliant esoteric plan for building a temple. Here's a few other circular temples. The Temple of Heaven in Beijing, and you can see the implied central point. Now here we've extended up to a central axis, and if a particular temple is considered to be the center of the world, and it's very possible that the Temple of Heaven in Beijing was considered to be that, then this becomes the axis mundi, or the axis of the world, the one axis, right? Then we have this extraordinary temple in India called Shausath Jogini. What you're looking at here is actually the central point, and that courtyard that you see encircling it goes all the way around and represents the circumference of the circle. And inside that courtyard, that circumference ring, you find these incredible goddesses lining the entire interior circular space. Really extraordinary. Then we have a temple in Kerala, and you can see here the emphasis on the central axis. And this Buddhist stupa in Lumbini, Nepal. All of these temples indicate the central point and by extension the central axis. I mean, here you can see the 7 levels. If you start at the top roof, that's square, and then it moves up at 7 levels if you include that square, until you have this flaming reality of what would be the Adi plane, right? And this Buddha at the top, just fabulous, fabulous temple. Okay, we also have stone circles, like the Swinside Circle in Cumbria, England, shown here. Avebury, now this is, you can see the stone circle, some of the stones, even though the town is right in the middle of the circle. And of course, the most famous stone circle in the world is Stonehenge. Now we're going to be taking a much closer look at stone circles and temples in general in a future webinar. I want to have at least 1, maybe 2 or 3 webinars that focus on sacred geometry in connection with temples and stone circles, because it's just a fascinating study. Okay, this concept of place representing the sacred center isn't confined to just temples, circular or otherwise. In ancient times, certain cities were seen as the center of the world. In Egypt, Heliopolis, which means city of the sun, was understood to be such a center. We find in the pyramid text that Atum descended from the cosmic sphere and came to rest on the primeval mound, or circle, of Earth at Heliopolis. He was an emissary of Ra, possibly just as our planetary logos is an emissary or center within our solar logos. Because the Egyptians recognized their gods as potencies more than as personas, they had no trouble combining their gods, and so we have Atum Ra as well as Atum and Ra. The only intact structure left in Heliopolis is this obelisk, which still stands where it was originally erected. You can't help but wonder if maybe, at least in the eyes of the ancient Egyptians, this marks the spot where Atum descended, the central point of the primeval mound called Earth. But as we know, Heliopolis is not the only center in the world. Remember the words of Hermes, God is an intelligible sphere whose center is everywhere? Well, in Black Elk Speaks, that great Dakota Indian shaman tells of one of his earliest visions. He says, I saw myself on the central mountain of the world. It was Harney Peak in South Dakota. And here's the key statement. But the central mountain is everywhere. with this statement, he indicates that he was having an experience of the central point, which, when seen three-dimensionally, becomes the axis of a sphere, the axis mundi around which the world rotates. This central point is at the hub of the cycle of both time and space, as we've explored, and is thus in a causal relationship to the time-space continuum. So you can see that the central mountain, which is everywhere, as Blackwell said, is in a causal relationship to Harney Peak, but they're hardwired. It's a direct manifestation of that central mountain, right? Well, another central mountain we have is Mount Kailas, right? It's known as the central mountain of the world by Tibetan Buddhists. Thousands of pilgrims walk its perimeter every year, thus creating the circle with the central point. Jerusalem is still seen as the center of the world by millions of people, both you know, in the Christian, the Jewish, and the Islams also see it as a vibrant central point.
Francis?
Yeah.
Yogi has typed in a couple comments here. We all need to return to the monadic light supernal, the way, the truth, the light. They are all children of the one while becoming one.
Thank you for that. That's terrific. I'd like to have you over for dinner. It'd probably last about 6 hours. Anyway, okay, we also find this circle with a point at the center in carvings, drawings, and even sand paintings, like this one from the Navajos. The circle with a point at its center not only represents the source of deity, but can also signify the field of endeavor and the goal on the path of return. And here we're making, we're shifting our focus a bit, or that is to say we're going to be bringing in another important element of this idea of unity, which is that it's not only the great outgoing process that's signified by the cosmic first logos, but it also represents a path of return, and we're going to be focusing on that for this next segment. Gosh, time flies. Okay, so the circle with the point at the center, you can see in the sand painting in a double sort of way, right? Because you not only see the face of deity, you see the two triangles and the little line at the bottom, which is the face of deity, but you also see an initiate or a magician who has recognized his unity with God. I love the fact that he's standing on the mouth of deity, which represents that he has recognized the one sound. You know, this is I find to be a terrific piece here, humble but just terrific. And this figure, of course, is potentially each and every one of us, right? Being the point at the center of the solar disk, as this figure demonstrates, is very Leonian. And since I have Leo rising, it's not surprising that I'm excited about this particular sand painting. Even a cursory look at this sand painting shows how well it illustrates the esoteric keywords for Leo. I am that, and that am I. This keyword's palindromic quality can take us from the center to the periphery, or on the path of return, from the periphery to the center, right? Do you see how that works? And this is another point at the center being the ultimate I, which is the one life, yes? And then you have the separated I, and then you have this intermediate stage, which is that, right? I am that, and that am I, or working from the center outwards. As an involutionary, I am that. right? And that am I. But let's get back to the Navajo piece. This sand painting also illustrates the most well-known of the Navajo prayers. Could we get a reader for this prayer? Someone volunteer? Someone who hasn't spoken yet. Volunteer, if you would, to read this prayer.
I have no volunteers yet.
Oh, they will.
Here we go. Hi, Leah. Go ahead, please.
Morning. I will
Morning.
be, good morning, Francis. I will be as I was before. I will have a light body. Nothing will hinder me. I walk with beauty before me. I walk with beauty behind me. I walk with beauty below me. I walk with beauty above me. I walk with beauty around me.
Thank you. Beautiful reading, by the way. Do you sense the central position of the one reciting this prayer? If you're going to ascribe a geometric figure to this prayer, what would that figure be? I don't think I really even have to ask, because it's pretty clear, isn't it? It's a circle or a sphere, right? Before me, behind me, above me, below me. But we also have the cube of space. Both are represented in this sand painting. In fact, we could say that this mandala, that in this mandala, the initiate is squaring the circle, right? Squaring the circle is an ancient metaphor for aligning oneself with spirit. When the circle, representing the higher self, increases its influence to the point where its circumference equals that of the square, which represents the form nature or personality of the disciple, alignment takes place, right? But as theosophists, we're taught that this concept runs even deeper. For when the level of soul infusement, represented by the circle, grows to the point that it equals the circumference of the square, or lower quaternary, a threshold is reached and the disciple becomes radiatory, a level of consciousness depicted in this painting. Yeah? You can see by those feather-like emblems that there's this point of radiation. Okay, but I'd like to back up a minute. I want to pick up another thread. Let's look at this Navajo prayer again. We've determined that the geometry described in the prayer and the geometry of the mandala are interrelated, right? Thus, hearing is aligned with sight, which in ritual practice increases the experience of immersion. If you add incense and movement, the outer senses can then be used to carry the disciple inwards. Okay, Professor Nasser at Tehran University describes an esoteric Islamic ritual, which I'd like to share with you. It's just marvelous. Keep in mind the circle and the point at the center during this description. Okay, here's what he says. He suggests placing oneself at the center of a circle, facing north with hands outstretched at dawn. As the sun rises from this position, the right hand receives the coming light from the east. Once received, the participant then turns east, as you see this figure doing, towards the rising sun, thus literally, but more important, symbolically, reorienting him or herself towards the light. And here's the part that really deepens this process. The right hand is now to the south, which, according to esoteric Islamic practice, is the direction of Yemen, which we know as a country, but Yemen means wisdom and is thus in a position to receive that wisdom. I think it's very interesting that Yemen is to the south of Mecca in this relationship. So now, when a temple is built in such a way that its architecture squares the circle, its influence helps those who meditate or participate in a ritual within its precincts to align with their higher selves. The Great Pyramid of Giza, one of the most extraordinary temples on our planet, it's not a burial tomb, it's a temple, was built with the object in mind of squaring the circle in a most ingenious way. Okay, we see no circle when we view the Great Pyramid, right? That's because the circle is implied by its height, which is equal to the radius of a circle whose circumference is equal to the perimeter of the base of the pyramid as shown by this illustration. Okay, let me walk you through that. What you're seeing here is in orange is a straight-on view of the pyramid, right? And then the light yellow is an aerial view looking down on the top of the pyramid. All right, so if you start at the center point and you use the height of the pyramid as a radius, and you inscribe a circle, which is represented by the blue, the circumference of that circle equals the perimeter of the Great Pyramid of Giza. So this is the definition of squaring the circle. This is just one of the many significant geometrical proportions of the Great Pyramid, and I hope we can explore others in future webinars. It's a most astonishing structure. So the pyramid symbolizes the four corners, the four coming into alignment with the one, or the square with the circle, both by squaring the circle and by the fact that its four sides rise upwards to culminate in one apex. This apex is missing on the Great Pyramid, and some think it was never there because it represents spirit. Many say that squaring the circle illustrated both by the Navajo sand painting and by the dimensions of the Great Pyramid is an interesting but purely symbolic metaphor. I would counter with the Tibetan's quote that we read earlier. All forms veil a divine thought, idea, or truth, and are the tangible manifestations of a divine concept. Hence, the squared circle is a tangible manifestation of a divine concept, which when read spiritually allows us to contact the originating potency, which helps us to align the self with spirit. This is the difference between lower mind study, I'll be right with you, BL, between lower mind study of number and geometry and seeking an experience of its potency. Both are necessary. But Joseph Campbell, in his series on the power of myth, which I just rewatched recently, it's just a fabulous series, I recommend it, said that he had come to realize that people weren't seeking explanations so much as they were seeking a greater experience of life, what he called the rapture of being alive. So the Navajo prayer, the Islamic ritual described by Professor Nasser, and the Great Pyramid were all designed to enable a disciple to contact the living presence, which is the source of the form, so that through that contact, the seeker may have a greater experience of life. Okay, Bia?
Okay, and that greater experience of life, as Yogi has been commenting in reference all of your slides on squaring the circle and the Navajo prayer and everything. Let me see. Awakening consciousness places us everywhere at once, sometimes fun, sometimes discerning. Babies are known to cry when they're birthed. Initiations as expansions of consciousness get easier and easier. Time is not a problem. Energetically and with open eyes, every single human being is beauty and is beyond belief in dreams till then. Every human is superhuman. Initiation causes large bands of angels to party. That was his LOL added to that.
Okay.
And Great Pyramid Pi rules. Inwardly spinning, outwardly reaching, upward reaching, spiral, cyclic motion came from Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
Yogi, each side bows inward a little. Why? Maybe strength, yet many stones are laser cut. Lasers back then? I don't think so. Thank you, Francis, for an amazing, oh, you can look at that later. Oh, that's from Asha, but anyway, it's a thank you to you for the great job that you're doing. Okay, so anyway, I just wanted to add that in there about the what Yogi was saying about initiation, and that all humans are now and will take that first initiation, you know, humanity as a whole. And so the studying together as we're doing now, as Yogi tells us, is going to contribute to that.
Yes, this is one of the Tibetans' comments that we're coming into a stage where all humanity will be moving on through the temple gate, so to speak, to take that first initiation. An astonishing idea when you study what the first initiate needs to have accomplished. So we can hope that that is true. I have so very much more, and we have minus 6 minutes of time left. So we're going to just have to pick up where we left off. But I did want to let me come out of full screen mode here so I can move you down to the bibliography. I had a request from a student to provide the not a bibliography so much as a reading list. So if you're interested in, and obviously many of you are, in the subject matter that we've been discussing today, here are 3 terrific sources, probably in order of difficulty, the Pro-Am being the most difficult. It's only 20 pages, but it takes a lot of concentration to move through those pages. It's an absolute fabulous read. So I recommend that. And there's a book called The Key to the Universe. It was published back actually before Dual Cool and Alice Bailey started their work together. And I think it was about 1915, called The Key to the Universe by a couple, Harriet and Homer Curtis. Terrific book on numbers. The first few chapters of that deal with the subject matter we've talked about today. And then a much easier read, but it's just wonderful, the insights that Michael Schneider comes forward with, called the Introduction, called The Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe. And you can, especially the last 2 books, The Key to the Universe and the Constructing the Universe, through this whole series you can be just reading the relevant chapters. So it's a way of really priming yourself for these webinars. And that's all we have time for. What a shame. We could easily go another hour, but isn't that always the case? Thanks so much for attending. If you enjoyed the webinar, you might consider stuffing a few bucks into the virtual jar on MoryaFederation.com to help maintain the website. And I'd like to end with an invocation which expresses the potency of the number 1 as well as anything we've looked at today. Michael, are you still with us? Michael Robbins?
Yes, I am. I am.
Would you? Yes, I can.
Okay, let's see if I have. Okay, yes. Right.
Perfect.
Francis, do you want me to read this?
Would you please? Thank you.
I surely will, and it's just been wonderful. Thank you so much for this fascinating work. And I will read this, and thank you, everybody, for your contributions. Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
Just, all right. May the power of the one life pour through the group of all true servers. May the love of the one soul characterize the lives of all who seek to aid the great ones. May we fulfill our part in the one work through self-forgetfulness, harmlessness, and right speech.
Thank you very much. Okay, everyone. That's all we have time for today. I want to thank you for attending. And the next webinar will be on two-ness. This is sort of like a very slow Sesame Street progression through the numbers. But you'll find that the subject matter will shift quite a bit as we explore these new ideas. Real quickly, here are the two symbols that are most often associated with the number 2. The circle with the diameter. This is at a very high level, the second logos, and the very familiar yin-yang symbol. And we'll take a look at those and everything connected with two-ness at the next webinar. So I thank you again for attending.
On the 20th of July.
20th of July. It's always the, am I right in saying it's the third Sunday of every month? If
Yes.
you forget the date, you can remember it that way. And they're from now on going to always be at 8 p.m. GMT, just to make it easier for people on both ends of the globe, Australia and Europe. Okay, well, goodbye then, and thanks again.
Bye, everybody.